Hey, so how about this new Ninja Turtles movie? It's been nice to see what a great reception this is getting because I was a big fan of the Turtles when I was a kid. They were huge in the 90s. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like any media they've been in since then has really taken off. I think when superhero movies were going through their edgy, realistic phase, it never really worked for them. The Turtles work best in light-hearted, kid-friendly media. They're teenagers. They like to goof off, play video games, and eat pizza. And this movie really leans into their youth. It's kind of a coming-of-age story. Which is refreshing because I feel like the teenage aspect of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles tends to be underused. I hear this is the first time they've actually all been voiced by teenagers, and those four kids did a great job. They really sold me on the idea of these four brothers growing up trying to find their place in the world. It's like if Malcolm in the Middle was about superheroes. Also, this movie is kind of an origin story, which is interesting because it made me think about how the Turtles have never really had that. Like, I know they were mutated from turtles and trained by Splinter, but until now, I don't think we've ever seen them, fighting for the first time. Which is weird when you think about it. I mean, they're teenagers, which implies that they were children not long ago. And yet, I don't think we've ever seen them, become heroes. We might see them, meet April for the first time or something, but they're always already badass ninjas. So yeah, it was nice to see a version of them where they're a little less sure of themselves. So this movie's a full-on reboot, and it makes some pretty major changes to the lore. Probably the biggest being that Splinter was never a human. He was a rat mixed with human DNA as opposed to the other way around, and instead of being a former master ninja, now he teaches them martial arts because of their mutual love of kung fu movies. So in this movie, he's not really their ninja master. Instead, he's more of just a single dad trying to raise them the best he can. They even call him Dad now instead of Master Splinter. Some people might not like these changes, but personally, I'm fine with it. You know, when the Turtles were first created, the concept for what they were was wildly different from what they became. The original comic was a one-shot joke meant to parody the kind of edgy, violent comics that were becoming popular in the early 80s, mainly Daredevil. And you can still see remnants of this. You know, Daredevil was trained by a ninja master named Stick. The Turtles were trained by a ninja master named Splinter. Daredevil fights an evil clan of ninjas called the Hand. The Turtles fight an evil clan of ninjas called the Foot. I bring all this up to point out that the Turtles as we know them today are really more of a product of the 90s TV show and the live-action movies. They're fun, they're silly, they're light-hearted, and most importantly, they're relatable to kids. So to me, the idea of reinventing them as less of an order of ninjas and more as four young boys being raised by a single dad makes perfect sense, and I'm glad the filmmakers weren't afraid to shake things up. That said, I do feel the need to point out that Splinter's accent no longer makes sense. It doesn't really bother me, and I realize it's because he's voiced by Jackie Chan, but it had to be said. I do kinda wish they'd cast someone else, though. Not because of the accent, but just because Jackie Chan's not that good a voice actor. No shade on him, he's extremely talented in other areas, but casting him here just feels like a gimmick. So basically in this movie, the Turtles are around 15, and they've never interacted with the outside world. Splinter forbids them from talking to humans because he thinks they'll be kidnapped and experimented on. Meanwhile, they're eager to be part of the human world. They want to go to school and have friends like normal kids. So that gives us our main theme, finding acceptance and belonging, which is a good theme for something aimed at kids and teens. They meet up with April, who in this version is also a teenager, which is another good change. If you're going to play them more as kids, then their best friend should also be a kid. She's kind of a social outcast at school, and that gives a more grounded parallel for the Turtles story. Later, they meet some other mutants, led by Superfly, who think they'll never be accepted by humans, so they have a plan to activate this device and mutate every animal on Earth, so they'll be the dominant species and can subjugate the humans. So yeah, the themes of this movie are pretty surface level and obvious, which is good, it's for kids. Although I enjoyed it a lot, and I think most adults would. As far as the moment-to-moment dialogue, it's mostly good, although there are a few stumbles. There's a couple jokes that don't land, and some of them are thrown in at a time when it should be more serious. But these are minor problems. Most of the jokes were good. I've seen some people say they connected to this as an immigrant story, which is kinda cute and fits pretty well. Although, I don't know how far I want to take that analogy, considering one of the mutants in the movie does turn into a giant monster and attack New York. The animation in this movie is fantastic. Since the advent of 3D animation, I feel like we've all gotten pretty sick of that smooth, clean look you get from Disney and Pixar's work, and it's been nice to see movies like this and Enter the Spider-Verse that use 3D but are still able to add some of the style and personality that comes with hand-drawn animation. I appreciate that you can actually tell the turtles apart without their masks. And my favorite thing about this movie might actually be the score. It's like this heavy electronic industrial noise rock kind of thing. I didn't know this going into the movie, but I found out after it was actually co-written by Trent Reznor, which makes sense, it's just not what I would have expected. Anyway, that combined with the animation really makes this a treat for the senses. If this movie had had terrible writing, I'd probably still be recommending it just for the aesthetics. Thankfully, the writing is actually pretty good. The movie also makes use of a lot of licensed music, which I mostly liked. There were two that bothered me. One is Unwritten by Natasha Bedingfield, which plays for like 5 seconds and just feels like a reference. The other is Push It to the Limit, which they used twice. It doesn't fit that well, and it feels like the song's only here because it's a meme. But other than those two, great uses of licensed music. Nice to hear ODB in a kid's film. One thing this movie got me thinking about is that we as a society really don't value kids' media enough. I see people all the time making excuses for shitty kids' movies by being like, oh, it doesn't matter, it's just for kids. And you know what? Some of the best movies and TV shows I've ever seen are for kids. Kids might be easier to please than adults, but a well-written story with visual personality and relatable characters is always going to stick with them more. There's a reason everyone my age remembers the Disney Renaissance fondly, but Ferngully has become a joke. It's because those movies were really good, except for Pocahontas, and Ferngully sucked. Kids are smarter than we tend to think, and sometimes they even have a perspective that adults lack. There are tons of people online complaining about changes that this movie made to the TMNT lore and characters, as if that's so important. And that's a very adult reaction, because as adults, we're used to things being a certain way, and we don't always like change. But kids don't bring that baggage in with them. They engage with a movie on its own terms. So maybe we should appreciate their perspective a bit more. Anyway, this movie does feel like it's specifically made with kids in mind, which I found kind of refreshing. I remember a while back, Rich Evans from Red Letter Media said something to the effect of, "Isn't it sad that little kids don't have a Batman anymore?" And he's right. We as adults have taken Batman and used him to make a bunch of dark, angry crime movies for ourselves. And thinking about that kind of makes me appreciate the Ninja Turtles more. Because you can't do that to them. They're too inherently silly.
I don't know about you, but I take comfort in that.
Okay, one more thing I have to say about this movie is that there's a mid-credits scene which I mostly liked. It's some adorable scenes of the Ninja Turtles going to school and making friends, coming out of their shells as it were. Then they end it with a weirdly out-of-place teaser that Shredder's gonna be in the next movie. And why? You don't have to tell me that Shredder is going to be in a Ninja Turtles movie. That's my natural assumption. I'm surprised he wasn't in this one. And it's not like Shredder has his own fans. Nobody's out there going, oh, I wasn't really interested in that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie before, but now that I know Shredder's going to be in it, I'm going to see it in the theater. That person does not exist. Are these mid-credits teasers just obligatory now? At this point, I half expected one at the end of Oppenheimer. I guess Marvel's just broken my brain. Actually, that might have been a fun idea. You could have JFK show up, played by some famous actor, and be like, Dr. Oppenheimer, I need your help. What do you know about the moon?